What's up, guys? My name is Ricardo, Neiva, otherwise known as Cine, and today we're going to be editing the photos you guys DM me on Instagram and my social medias. Link in the bio. Go follow them. Hit the intro. So I posted a TikTok on my TikTok channel, Cine, go check it out, for you guys to send me photos and I would edit them and make a YouTube video about them. Now, we got quite a few submissions, so we're going to jump straight into it. But before we jump straight into it, stick around to the end so you can hear about the special thing that we're going to be doing from now on in the entirety of the channel. Let's go. Cool, so you guys send me your photos and I cannot wait to edit them. Now, few things. I will be editing on Lightroom Mobile. Okay, and now the reason why I'll be editing on Lightroom Mobile is for two reasons. One, my laptop's in the repairs, so can't really use it. And then two, Lightroom Mobile is free and it's very, very extensive and it's got a lot of features, especially for the free version. So, also disclaimer, not a sponsored video by Lightroom. But yes, we're going to be jumping straight into it. We're going to be editing these photos and I'll be talking to you about why I'm doing certain things and how I'm trying to get certain looks, and then we'll look at some before and afters. Okay, so the first photo that we're going to be editing is sent by my good friend Katie Detroit, Instagram handle over there. And she basically challenged me to edit this photo and make it bomb diggity. I already did a little bit of a crop, and how to make this photo amazing, Katie, because I promised you I would. Here's my amazing edit. It's bomb diggity. You see, I'm joking now. Okay, let's actually be serious about it. Cool. So, right now jumping into the photo, the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go into the lights tab, which is over here, right there. Yeah, cool. And from there, I will be playing around with exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, and the tone curve. Now, the first thing I do is I look at the histogram, which you can get on Lightroom Mobile by touching your two fingers on the screen, and that will give you the information that you require. Now, I've got my histogram up, and I can see that the information is pushing very high into the highlights, and that's because it's a very white image, and it's a teeny bit overexposed over there on the right side corner. Now, to fix that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just go into my exposure little tab right there at the top, and I'm going to bring it down just a smidge. Cool. Now, the exposure tab, what it does is it affects everything in the image. The shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. Now, the reason why I did that was because I actually want everything in the image to go a little bit darker. Now, specifically focusing on the highlights, because I still want the highlights to go a little bit lower, I'm going to go into the highlights tab and I'm going to bring it down. That looks pretty good. I like the way that image is starting to look. Let's look at some before and after. As you can see, it's quite bright, and I release, and it's a little bit darker. It's got a little bit more of a softer look, which was how the picture was taken. Cool. Then I'm going to bring back the shadows a little bit down, just a little bit. Yeah, that's looking good. Cool. Now the whites, what white does is it affects the lighting that's most white. It basically takes the brightest point of your images and tries to make it white, and black takes the darkest point of the images and tries to make it black, pure white. Now that's because of the color grading principle, or the photo editing principle, which is you can make any crazy look, but as long as either black is black or white is white, you're pretty much golden. So yeah. Turn down. Cool, so yeah, I just pushed down the whites a little bit more because it still feels a little bit bright on the wall on the right side, and I really want that wall to kind of not be so harsh. Cool, now we're going to jump into the color tab. Now the color tab is where you can fix your white balance. You can change the tint, so if you shot in with a fluorescent room, fluorescents can sometimes have a little bit of green in them or a little bit of magenta in them, depending on the CRI. So here's where you can fix those little images and get the color looking really pretty. So again, white is white or black is black. Cool, now in my histogram you saw the blue started to move. Now the blue at the top there was moving down and up, and that's how I got the white to be white, is because if they're relatively merged together, that's a pretty good white level. And I actually don't need to mess with the tint because as I was playing around with it, I saw that it wasn't really working. Cool, vibrance, saturation. Now the reason why I push vibrance and saturation up a little bit more is because I want to see the colors. So I'm going to put them up and then I'm going to go around and I'm going to change them and edit them how I feel like I need to edit them. Cool, now I jumped into the color mix area. Now this is where you can selectively pick your colors to edit them. Now the reason why I'm going into the red HSL is because red is the lips and it's also got a little bit into the cheeks. So I can use this by playing around with it and changing the luminance and the saturation to make it darker and actually contrast the image a little bit more and like round off the face and create a little bit more texture on her. So yeah. Now I'm going into orange because orange is the color of skin, so I can play around with the skin tones and get the skin tones really nice, because skin tones is also another thing. If you ever do photography for clients and fashion models and all of that, they're going to be looking at skin tones. If their skin looks off, your photo looks off, and they're not going to pay you. And they're going to be like, yeah, can you re-edit? And you'll be like, but it's so pretty. And you'll be like, no, the skin tones are wrong. Do the skin tones. I'm now zooming in right now just so I can look at the skin tone, especially because I'm affecting that part of the image right now. So I've got the skin tone pretty well because I white balanced correctly, so the skin is actually quite representative. So all I had to do was just play around with the saturation to just make it a little bit more accurate for my eye. Then I was just playing with the luminance a little bit more because I'm trying to make it a little bit brighter because she is the subject, so I want it to be more focused on her. So by making her a little bit brighter, the audience's eyes instantly attracted to her in the image. Cool, now yellow is also a little bit in the skin because of the hair being blonde. It's bouncing off the light and like a little bit more in her skin. So I'm making that a little bit darker just to model her face a little bit more through color. It's very subtle, but it helps. Cool, now this image is actually really white, so there's not a lot of color things I can do. But if you look over there, right there, there's some green. Now this is where we're going to have fun. We're going to create our look right there. And by our look, I mean I'm literally just going to change that green to be a little bit more blue and give it a little bit more of a teal look because I'm a big fan of teal and orange. So pushing that a little bit more, you can see that changed. So like before, and then I'm going to change it back to 46, I believe was the number. After, you see it's a little bit more greener. I'm going to bump up that saturation just to give it a little bit more of a pop. And then I'm going to turn down the luminance because I don't want it to be brighter so that the audience isn't distracted by that very vivid green color. Cool. And that looks pretty good. So, before, after, color-wise, it's pretty good. Now, here's where we're going to have some fun. I'm going to go into my light section again because I've done my color. And I'm going to play with my tone curve. Cool, so I'm happy with that. That looks pretty good. Again, this is a very white photo. So like there's not a lot of much to do. And the white is a very bouncy source. So it's going to be very bright. But that looks good. I like it. It looks nice. Cool, so now I'm going to go into the effects tab. And this is where I'm going to be cleaning out, smoothing out the skin, sharpening out a little bit of the detail, stuff like that. Cool, so now the reason why I played with texture, clarity, and DAs is because I wanted to smoothen out the skin. The reason why I wanted to smooth out the skin is just because it is a selfie and you want it to be a little bit more beautified, and the idea of beautified is to have a little bit more smoother skin. So just smoothing it out, not losing too much detail where it looks blurry, but just smoothing it out so that it looks a little bit more fair works a lot, really well. Then I dehaze. Now the reason why I use dehaze is just to remove atmospheric elements, so it just makes the image look a little bit more clean. It removes any sort of like imperfections in the light that could be recorded in the camera. Cool, so I've played around a little bit more with the image. I've played with the effects, I've played with the detail, just added a little bit more sharpening, smoothing out the texture a little bit more, all of those things. So now what I'm going to do is, like I said, I go into color and I finish off the vibrance and saturation. It's last just to get the image where I want it to be. So I go into vibrance, I'm going to turn that down just a smidge, And I'm going to turn down saturation up a little. I'm going to turn up saturation just a smidge. So yeah, before, after. I think it looks really good. There's just a little bit more shadow. Skin's a little bit more smoother and a little bit more accurate. And I think it looked cool. So cool. So the next image that we're going to be editing today is by Paige.I. Check her out on Instagram. Little handle over here. And link in the bio as always. Cool. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to jump into the photo and I'm going to crop. Now the reason why I like to crop is because it just sometimes you just need the image to focus a little bit more on a certain section. So we're going to crop. We crop 4:5 just because that's the best for Instagram. Technically the best for Instagram is like 4.5:5 or something like that. I'm not entirely sure on the exact ratio, but I know 4:5 works really well, and that's the cropping that I usually use for portraits. So crop. Cool. 4:5. Cool. So I like the top of the head, and I want to add a little bit of the leading lines from the seat, but I want to avoid that little bright spot over there because that's really bright and overblown. And I think by just pushing it a little bit more, using the rule of thirds, and using the rule of thirds a little bit more, and composing her to the left side, and having that leading line of the cushion will really accentuate the photo a little bit more. So pushing in, that's my crop. Save. Cool, so after cropping the photo, I'm going to jump straight into the light tab and start editing. Now, there's a thing I should note, that all of these are JPEGs, so I don't have as much information in the image as I would if I had shot RAW. So I'm not going to be too harsh on trying to fix the harshness and overblownness of the hair, but rather I'm just going to smoothen it out a little bit, and then I'm going to focus more on refining the rest of the image so that it all kind of feels put in place and that bright spot on the hair isn't as noticeable. Now, let's do this. So I'm going to turn down exposure just a smidge. Cool. Turn down exposure just a smidge. I'm going to play with contrast and I'm going to neutralize it a little bit more so that it's not as contrasty in the imagey. And now what I like about neutralizing the contrast and pushing it down and making it less is it kind of flattens out the image and makes it have a very fair look on the skin right now. So we're going to keep on that and we're going to build on that because these are all selfies and you want them to be beautified, and soft light is the best for beautifying. It beautifies the image so bad. Cool, so now what I can tell from my histogram is that everything is kind of spread out really nicely. There's no two major points. Everything is within the last two bars in the histogram. So we're going to keep building on that. So I've gone into my light tab, I've turned down the exposure, I've brought down the highlights, I've taken away contrast just because I really want the image to look soft and natural and beautify it a little bit more. And then I've played around with my black and white point just to get them accurate. So we're going to execute a teal and orange look here because there's a lot of blue and the skin tone is orange, so it lends itself perfectly to this kind of edit. So playing around with temperature. I'm going to warm it up a little bit. It's a little bit off. I'm going to warm it up on purpose a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm going to take away a little bit of the green in the image. Cool. Vibrance, saturation. That looks kind of good. Cool. So I've got my temperature and my tint really well. I've bumped up my vibrance and my saturation. Then I can play around with that how I feel. Cool, so now I'm going to go into my mixing tab. Like I said, red is for the lips and a little bit in the skin just to sculpt it a little bit more. And then I'm going to play in with the orange and the yellows to get the skin tone really nicely while still keeping that orange feel. And then I'm going to go play with the blues and try to get it into the teal look just so I can round off a nice teal and orange look. Cool, so I'm going to go through each little color section and then I'm going to tell you what I did there and why I did it. So cool, so I changed red to like pump up the lips a little bit more, make them pop, and because there's a little bit of red in the skin tone just to sculpt it a little bit more through color. It's very subtle, but it looks really nice. Then orange, I left the orange tab completely how it is because if I do, I'll show you what happens. I can make her very different skin tones, which we don't want to do. So I just played around with saturation until I got something that I felt was very accurate to a skin tone based on the original picture. Then I played with the luminance just to make it brighter just because I want her to be the star of the photo. And so by making a little bit brighter on her skin, the audience's eye is going to be subjected to focusing there. Cool. Then I played with the green and I got the green roughly to a blue point where I felt wasn't too unnatural, but it kind of lent itself to the teal and orange look. And then I brought the saturation down because I want the teal to be in the shadows and on the lower ends of the mid-tone details. And then I played with saturation because I don't want it to be too bright and overly saturated. Then I went into the aqua. That looks aqua. Aqua. And I left that the way it is because that's the blue I really wanted. It's a blue that's kind of got this dreamy quality to it. So then I just played with the saturation, made it a little bit brighter, and then I pushed it again into the shadows, into the lower mid-tone areas. Then I went into the blue. Now, her jacket in the scene was very blue, so I literally pumped that down quite until the point where I felt like it was almost at the aqua stage. I turned down the saturation just because I didn't want it to be overly powerful, because if I change the saturation then it looks very neon, and I didn't want it to look very neon. I wanted it to feel a little bit more natural, and I felt by taking the saturation away, I lost a little bit of the color detail, and it felt more flowy into the actual scene of the picture. So I'm going to bring that back down. Then I played with the luminance area, and I got it into the shadow area where I wanted it to be, and I got it into the mid-tone area where I wanted it to be, because her jacket is also in that range of the mid-tone area, and it's blue. So I needed to not push it too low, otherwise it would just go into the shadows, and then you'd have these very weird color contrasty lines. Cool, so I went into the purple tab, and I put the hue right down to the bottom where it was basically going into blue. And the reason why is because if it goes into blue, then it will go into the other one, and then we can play around with the color tabs that way. I turn the saturation completely down so that there's a gray point, which then when I bring the luminance down completely to 0, it will bring a black point. And then with magenta, I didn't want to play with magenta too much, so I just turned down the saturation, have a gray point, because you always need a little bit of gray, just because it adds a little bit of a natural look, because there's gray in everything slightly. Cool, so that was my color tab. The before, the after. I really like the way that looks right now. So after that, I'm pretty much done. I'm then going to go into my effects tab. I'm going to smoothen out the skin. The skin's already smooth, so I'm not going to do too much. I'm just going to do a little bit. And I'm going to take down clarity just a little bit. And I'm going to dehaze just because I want the atmospheric elements that could be there, such as dust or anything that could have like made the camera captured light incorrectly, to go away. And I always like to just add a smidge of dehaze towards that, also because it adds a little bit more contrast. So dehaze to about 5. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I might actually bump it up to 7. You know what? 10 looked really good for me. I'm gonna go to 10. I brought it up a little bit more because it wasn't doing exactly what I wanted to do. So I popped it up a lot more than I was going to. And that's actually a really good method when you're editing photos. If you don't know what something does, take it to an extreme and then see how it works. And then you start playing around and finding the part where you really like it. Cool, then we're going to add a vignette because I like vignettes because it darkens out the image and then again focuses that subject. And that's what you need to look at. Focusing the subject, making the audience focus on the subject. Focus on your subject. So vignetting. Vignette looks really good. We're going to add just a smidge of sharpening just because I'm noticing that from the original image, it's a tad bit blurry. So I just want a little bit of sharpening just to focus it out a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good. Cool, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go to my tone curves and I'm just going to play around with the contrast a little bit more. Just because I've got my look, I've done my dehaze, I've done all of that. Now I'm going to go to my tone curves and just play around with that. So in my tone curve, what I did is I made it a little bit of a gradual S-curve, and then I brought down the extremities into which it goes into the highlights and shadows area, and I brought it down by using the RGB curve. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Before, after. Before, after. So yeah, that is a good photo. I like the look. It looked clean. I like it a lot. So export it. But let's jump into photo number 3. So photo number 3 was sent to me by Imi_Hussein. I hope I said that correctly. He's a fellow South African photographer. Go give him a check out on there. He was like, reached out and he sent me a photo. And he sent me a photo of a cat. And who doesn't like cats? Cats are awesome. So we're going to edit a cat photo and make it cute. So cute. So good. Cool, so first thing we're going to do is jump straight into it and we're going to crop. Now, because this is landscape, I like cropping at 16:9. So we're going to crop in 16:9. I forgot. I already cropped this photo. I already cropped it. So I cropped it in. I focused a lot more on the eyes because look at his little cat food. Okay, so we're going to go right into light. go into light, fix with the exposure. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bump up the exposure this time. Push it a little bit more. Drop down the highlights. Oh, sorry. That's the wrong one. Drop down the highlights. Yeah. Bump up the shadows because I want the black patterns in this fur to really stand out. We can play around with the white and black point. That looks good. And I'm going to neutralize the contrast, take it away. Because I don't want the contrast to be too hectic. And I want the eyes to be seen because their eyes are so cute. Sorry, I'm having a real field day with this cat. Cool, then we're going to go into the color. And we're going to color by this image. Color. Cool, so I have basically fixed a little bit of the white balance. I made it a little bit warmer than it was originally. And that's because I want to play into making this photo a little bit, have more of a warmer, homier texture. So I purposefully messed up my white balance. But you'll see why when I finish mixing the color. Cool, so we're going to go through each little color section and the reason why I did it. Cool, now the reason why I played around with the red is because red was very much on the door because the door had a very maroonish color. So I bumped it a little bit more into the orange scale. I turned down the saturation because I didn't want it to be bright, and I brought down the luminance. Now this is because I wanted the cat's eyes, which are a lot more blue, green, and aqua within that scale, to pop because its eyes are stunning. Cool, so what I've basically done is I've basically then inverted what I've done with the teal and orange look, where I wanted the orange to be more poppy and I want the eyes to be more poppy. So I want the teal area to be more poppy. So I've now basically inverted it. So I've desaturated it and brought down the luminance. I brought down the red, yellow, and orange spectrum of color. And now I am playing around more with brightening up the blue, green, and aqua scale of color. And then magenta and purple can desat and die. So basically orange, like I said, pushed it a little bit more in the yellow, desat a little bit more. Yellow, I left it pretty natural. I just brought down the luminance and I took down the saturation just a smidge. I didn't want to take the saturation too much out of the yellow because I didn't want the yellow in his mouth on the sides over there to go gray because it's cute and I don't want to mess with his face. Cool. Green, I pushed it into the aqua. Aqua, I pushed a little bit more towards the green side, and then blue, I brought it down a lot more into the spectrum of aqua greenish color, the teal area. And then I brought down the saturation on the blue a little bit, but I've brought in the luminance just because blue isn't as prevalent, so it wasn't as important to have it not saturated. But with the green and aqua section, I've brought down the saturation a lot more up, and I've taken the luminance up as well. And then magenta and purple can die. Cool, now we're going to go into effects. We're going to play around with that. Cool, so I've now played with my effects and my detail. And basically all I've done there is I really made the cat's eyes pop by smoothing out the picture, playing around with clarity, playing around with DAs just to add a little bit more contrast. Like I said, I like to add that. And then I've taken the sharpening up just to make the eyes pop. Because look at those eyes. Cool, so I've done my editing on this cat. Let's check it out. Before, after. Before, after. I like that look a lot. I think it looks really cute, really cuddly, and it looks adorable. So yes. Cool, so because there's quite a few submissions, we obviously couldn't get through them. We only got through about 3 in this episode. But because I think it's really cool to engage with your photos and edit them and see your guys' creativity and your pizzazz, for lack of a better word. And I really enjoyed editing your photos. What we're going to be doing is, if you guys send me photos on any of my social medias, that's TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, Cine, Rick, links are in the bios, go check them out. I will edit them and you could have a chance to be seen at the end of each of my videos where it's a before and after of the photo that I edited for you guys. And I'll actually send you the edit back to you so you guys can have it. So yeah, but going straight into the next thing, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to do the funky funny stuff. That's like, share, subscribe, comment, all of the things that we ask you to do on YouTube. And I'll see you on the next one.